In this episode of Chamber Chats, we're joined by Stanley Tobin, Senior Director of Investment Banking with Young America Capital. With over 30 years of experience, Stanley helps business owners navigate complex financial scenarios, and I'm so excited to learn more. Stanley, thank you for sitting down with us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Such a pleasure to have you join us. So many business owners think about selling at some point, but they often hesitate. What typically brings a sale into motion?
Well, I think a business owner grows their business for many years, and at first they're not really thinking about selling it. All they're thinking about is making more money in the front door than they push out the back door. And over time they build it. Hopefully they bring family into it that can continue it. But in many cases, the realities are that the legacy is not there for them to pass the business to. So they're in a situation where, I've been putting all my money into the business, growing the business, and it makes me a great living. Afforded my family a wonderful life. But there's actually a lot of equity in the business that has built up over time. And depending on what industry and what business and the supply and demand of those particular businesses at any given time, they have a huge asset. And if it's well managed and prepared and so forth properly, it's by far their most valuable asset. So at some point, many owners come to the decision that they really should consider selling. The issue for them at that point is it's a big unknown. It's there are pitfalls to avoid. Most people, if they're lucky, sell one business in their lifetime, maybe two, maybe twice. So naturally, there's making informed decisions about the whole process is something that maybe I can help with because I've done this a bunch. And, buyers do it every month, every year, every month, every week sometimes.
Right.
So they've got a big advantage when they're sitting across the table from you. When they're the buyer and you're the seller, obviously it would be good to be a little bit prepared in terms of what to expect.
And that's what your company does, right? So help me understand how you describe the work that you do to someone who's interested or considering selling their business.
I work with an investment bank. It's a regulated industry. I have securities licenses that allow me to advise people. We're Young America Capital in Mamaroneck, New York. I actually live in Sarasota, not too far from here. But what I'm able to do is really focus on M&A, what they call M&A, which is mergers and acquisitions. Mm-hmm. And the specific areas of M&A that I focus on are businesses of a certain size and shape. Typically, a business with $5 million in revenue on the low end, very low end, up to, say, $100 million in revenue. Those are companies that are not going to get the attention of Morgan Stanley or JP Morgan or Goldman Sachs. So you may have good accountants. You may have great attorneys, both of which you're going to need if you're going to sell your business. But they, of course, also may not be as well-versed, although many of them are extremely well-versed in terms of just how the sale process typically runs and how to do it right, I guess.
Okay. And then, so if someone's considering this and they're saying, I think I'm going to see this opportunity for myself down the road, what are some things they can begin doing today to maximize that value as they approach an interested sale?
That's a really good point that you bring up, because one of the mistakes you can make is wait until you have no choice, because the buyers are going to ask always, why is the seller selling? Why are you selling? And what you don't want to have is a situation where you are more or less in a situation where you have no choice. You have to sell because obviously your options are limited, so they're not going to be quite as aggressive about pricing your business. So one of the things to really think about, even though you're there very comfortable in your business now, and if it's profitable, that's fantastic. But the thing to really think about is to prepare ahead of time. And that would include having a very good accountant, and the best would be to have your numbers audited. That makes you really attractive and shows buyers that you are, a well-organized, well-run business. Having a very good relationship, or just a relationship with a good corporate attorney, is a good idea. And I would absolutely have a conversation with them, just like you might have with someone like me, which means to talk about it at a high level before it happens, so that you are on the same page about how the process is going to work. But you want to be discreet. You don't want to necessarily let your customers or your employees or your competitors know that you're thinking about selling.
Sure.
But if you're in a situation where the market knows that you must sell for whatever reason because there's an illness or a death or some perhaps distress in the business, those are things that those things travel. It's a small community, business community. Everybody knows your status. So it's best to, even if you're not necessarily thinking about selling, perhaps just to have an overview conversation, high-level conversation about how does it work and what should I do.
And I'd imagine that confidentiality is a high concern for a lot of sellers. Do you have advice on how to protect confidentiality or maybe what you do with the companies that you work with?
Yeah, I would say confidentiality is always important for lots of reasons to business owners, which they all well understand. But the way that we typically maintain confidentiality is when we do a sale process, when we manage that process, we basically are sitting in the middle as, I guess, a broker I don't like to be called a business broker. That's what a lot of people call themselves. But as a sort of a broker between the company's internal information, strengths and weaknesses assessment, and on the other side, doing the deep research to determine who the most likely most interested buyers are, the candidates, if you will, to buy the company. So we do a lot of research on both sides. We want to know everything about the company, and we want to know what their market is, how their strengths and weaknesses compare to the marketplace. But to answer your question, we maintain confidentiality by coming up with a very succinct message and then attaching to that message. It's an email typically, and we have very expensive databases with which we can reach these prospective buyers that we're going to address. And what we typically do is attach a non-disclosure agreement to that. And we say maybe 5 bullet points about this business, the business they're in, their strengths, their size in terms of revenue, years in business, number of employees. These are things that, particularly focusing on some of their specializations if they have them, these are things that a buyer can look at in a minute and say, okay, I need to know more about that. And obviously the geographic location or region, not the exact location because we want to be discreet, but the region is also important. But attached to that, which is more or less casting like you're fishing, you're throwing out 1,000 casts to businesses that actually are strategically in the business, meaning they do the same business. So they may be interested in acquiring your territory, your customers, if not your expertise, that may be a little different from what they have. And then the second large set of buyers are financial buyers, which are private equity firms. And financial buyers typically specialize in an industry. So they're very knowledgeable about a business and the competitives and so forth, as are the strategics, obviously. But we do want to maintain confidentiality. So we typically ask them to sign a confidentiality agreement, a legally binding agreement that says any information that goes back and forth between us on both sides is to remain confidential for 2 years. Sometimes they negotiate that down. Sometimes they can't. It's up to how we feel about them, really.
Sure. Well, it's really nice because you're right. I think that kind of overcomes a seller's concern when it comes to confidentiality. And then how does a business owner know that they are going to be in control in this process?
It's a very good question, and it does segue into that because an NDA gives you some degree of control of your information, even though a lot of people don't have a tremendous amount of faith in them. They should, because I've never seen one be violated myself in doing this for this banking business for 12 years. But at every step of this process, the business owner or seller, prospective seller, should have control. And what that means is every piece of information that we put together, we help them structure what may be called a CIM or confidential info memorandum, which is basically a presentation that tells a particular buyer a lot more about the business than the 5 bullet points. So this is going to tell you who they are, where they're located, all about them and what their strengths are, and present them in the most positive light with pictures and perhaps org charts and things like that.
Okay.
Historical things. So we work on that with them so that they're comfortable with what we're saying about their business. We also obviously do a lot of work with databases, as I mentioned, on finding out who the most likely buyers are. And we discuss that in detail with the sellers. We give them the overview of the lists that we're putting together. And lots of times, the buyers themselves have very good relationships that they know might be a very good fit for them to sell to. In other words, they may be a good fit for that particular group of companies that they're aware of. Some of them are competitors. So that's where it gets tricky. Do I want to let my big competitor know that I may be selling even if there is a confidentiality agreement?
Sure.
So sometimes there's decisions to make about that. But at every step, when we send out that email, it gets someone's attention. Let's say we send 400 of these out in a geographic region or to the strategics that are of a size and shape and business position that this might synergistically fit well with in our thoughts. And by the way, when you do this process, if the seller has relationships that have asked him, hey, I'd love to buy your business, here's why it's a good idea to run a process like this or to even consider it. Because if that seller knows confidentially from you that you are running a process, they're going to have to, not to use bad language, but they're going to have to get off the pot. You know what I mean? They're going to have to move or get off the pot.
Got it.
So when they know there may be all of a sudden 7 or 8 other competing bids. So they may say, okay, if I want to buy this business, I've got to make a move and be friendly and aggressive about it. So anyway, to give the buyer control, though, we obviously go over who we're going to send this to. We make sure we don't send it to anybody that the seller is uncomfortable showing this to.
Sure.
And so they have control over that. When the NDAs get returned, they get 20 non-disclosure agreements back saying, we are interested in getting the information that's available on this company. They have the option at every opportunity or in every case to say, I just am not comfortable talking to them, at least not now. Let's go for these 5 first because they make the most sense to me. So they have control over who we take that step with. And in having that control, I give them a lot of information about the particular NDA. Who is this person, this business that wants to talk to you? How big are they? Do they have the wherewithal to do this transaction? Do they have a good reputation? Do you know them competitively in the marketplace? Are they good people? Do you like them? Just because this seller is going to have a lot of that. He's going to understand. But I'm going to give them very detailed financial information and any other information that I have access to really help them contemplate which ones am I most interested in.
Okay.
So what I'll do then is organize a Zoom call. We'll send them the information. They generally send back questions after they get this presentation, which can be an executive summary, can be a 1-pager typically, though. It's at least 12 pages of information. Or it could be a much more formal memorandum that is really vetted and printed with much more depth. At this level, though, that's not typical. I'd say 50 million and up, you might have a little bit more of revenue, and up you might have a little bit more detailed information. But having said that, the seller has control over everyone that you talk to. And with every interview, it's as much them interviewing the potential buyer as it is the buyer interviewing the seller. All that first meeting which is typically a Zoom. Sometimes it may be face-to-face at a conference room. But typically it's a Zoom because it's confidential and people don't want to use a lot of time if they're not necessarily interested. So in a Google Meet or Zoom call video conference, you sit down for a half hour, no more than a half hour. You get to know each other and talk, and mostly the seller gets to talk about their business. Why are they selling? A little bit about the business's niche, positioning, the area, anything. And then the buyer obviously will start asking questions because they're interested in coming at it from their own angle, as well as they want to know an overview of the business. How many employees? What's the best thing about your company? How long have you been in business? Those things. Just what kind of guy or woman are you that's selling? And then the buyer's usually going to come in with some pretty good hardball questions. But usually there's a vibe that's created on that call and on both sides. The buyer says, I like this. We need to get involved here and be aggressive. That would be the best response. Or they may say, I just don't see it as a fit. They may even say, I'm not impressed with the individual's personality, the woman or man's personality. And then the seller has to say, you know what, I could see that. I could see them being good. I like their disposition. I like their sense of humor. I like their approach, et cetera, et cetera. So hopefully there's chemistry. Chemistry is what it's all about. And that's why it's a hard business. For me, it's a hard business because the odds of success going all the way to the finish line, sometimes are a little long.
Yeah, it's
for
kind of like a
various reasons.
matchmaking process,
Yeah,
right?
it is.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so they have control, the buyer has control, and then they do the interview. The buyer gets to say which ones I really liked and which ones I didn't care for. So they are still, the seller, I apologize.
Okay. Uh-huh.
The seller has control at each step of the way. Who are we going to take a next step with? Are we going to answer their questions that they're asking? Even if so, let's get detailed answers back to them as soon as we can.
Okay.
And then who are we going to meet? Who are we going to actually meet face to face?
Mm.
And at some point, you get to the point where you've gone, and typically, by the way, the time frame on this, I'd say a month to 2 months to get the initial research done and the creation of the presentation as well. Lots of times companies have their own materials, so that can be fairly quick, and then we edit it. But between preparing the memorandums and putting together the prospective list of emails that you're going to send out, the outreach, if you will, typically that can be done in 1 to 2 months. And then when the email goes out, you will have responses within 2 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks on the outside. But by the time 4 weeks have gone by, you have found something out. And that is, what is the interest level in your company based on the size of it, the business it's in, the history of it, and the numbers. So that gives you control at every, as we were talking about, phase. When I have control over who I meet, who I send information to. I have control over who I respond to and meet with. I have control over who I actually bring in to give me a bid. And within 6 weeks, I should have bids. 4 weeks, usually.
Okay.
Usually it doesn't take that long. Now, if I also find out, let me take a step back, though, and say about this process, if you don't mind, that it is not just about you selling your business. I mean, you may be on the fence about selling your business. Just because you get into this does not mean you're obligated to do anything. But what you will come out of this process with is a very good idea, a wealth of information about how your business is viewed in the marketplace. Now, you may be very confident, well, my business is very strong, and it probably is. But I did a deal last year where I sold a construction company that did excavation, mostly for data centers, for what are called hyperscale tier 4 data centers. And I sent out 600, I don't think I sent that, maybe 400 to 500 emails in this outreach. And I got 200 non-disclosure agreements back for one business.
Wow.
So obviously he was in a very, what you'd call a hot space. And then we eventually got 8 different bids or offers, formal offers. And an offer by an offer, I'm talking about a letter of intent.
Okay.
So that was a situation where we knew right away that his expertise was sought after at this time. And then there are other times when we may go and do 5 or 6 interviews and no one makes an offer. But we get information from each one of them about what their thoughts are about the business. What is it that is making them not want to submit an offer? We usually, though, get an offer. We rarely do a process where we don't get at least a couple of offers. Okay. But typically we have, 5 to 10 offers, which is good because each of them knows it's a bit of a competitive process.
Yep.
The mistake sometimes that business sellers make is they sit down across the table from one entity that is interested in buying them, but they never go out and talk to anybody else. And you run the risk of that person playing a better game of poker than you. You run the risk of underselling yourself.
Sure.
So, and by the way to keep that person honest is to hire, a banker, an advisor, an M&A advisor. So anyway, I don't know if did I.
Yeah, so you thank you, Stanley. You walked us through how to set yourself up for success from a profitability perspective, how to engage an agency like yours that can create that matchmaking. We understand the bid process. And then let's say it's successful. A match is made, offer is accepted. Talk to me about that closing timeline. Are there costs to be anticipating? Maybe that last step.
Yeah, I think the cost is a good thing to talk about. It's obviously... there's a lot of work involved. There's a considerable amount of time. And one of the things that I try to do for sellers is minimize the amount of time that they actually have to think about this. In other words, I'm not going to allow them to talk to anybody that is not thoroughly vetted, that doesn't have the wherewithal and the presence to be a worthy candidate. And then I try to organize that presentation or those meetings. I'm going to manage all these meetings. I'm going to oversee the question and answer, and just make sure things run smoothly and everything is kept track of for the seller.
Right.
Because again, this is kind of daunting because they do this maybe once, twice, and if they're really good, 3 times in their life, they sell businesses. So they want that somebody managing that process. But in return for all this, we do typically ask for a fee-based commission on the value of the sale. So we're motivated to make the sale as maximized as possible. Typically, that rate of commission varies by the size of the business, more or less. I can't imagine what other variables there would be, but I think that the harder the business is to sell, and when I say that, I mean a business that's been in business for 2 or 3 years is harder to sell than a business that's been in business for 30, 40 years. And the amount of revenue, and particularly the profit margins, are all very important. So those things make it easier to sell. Better profit margins, more revenue, and especially also important is a trajectory of growth. In other words, an increasing amount of sales revenue and profitability is always good. But listen, I understand by no means do most small businesses have very smooth ascent and very smooth looking financial lines. If you have those are great, but you don't necessarily need those.
Okay.
Lots of times a larger company can do 2 + 2 = 5 or 6 because they have economies of scale. So they know they can bring you in and make your margins double right away. So don't think just because your business has had ups and downs doesn't mean that it's valuable. But we typically charge, I hate to say charge, it's a fee-based only commission, first of all, which is very important. That means that if we do not have a successful sale for whatever reason, then you don't pay us the commission.
Okay.
We may ask for a retainer up front, but it wouldn't be more than $5,000 to $10,000. And usually it's not any retainer. There may be a retainer up front just to cover some costs because we're going to put a lot of time and effort into this.
Sure.
But typically a business of $100 million in revenue that's going to sell for something in the $50 to $130 million range, typically we're going to ask 1% to 2% for that. A smaller company that is more in the 10 million to say 20 to 30 million range, we're probably going to ask 3 to 4% for that.
Okay.
So it goes up as you get smaller and tougher. And if you're a brand new business and it's really challenging, you're really emerging, it might be 5% max. Commission rates are coming down like they are with everything.
Sure.
But I think you'll find that with all that an advisor can help you with in terms of giving you the ability to make an informed decision on something that is very important to you and your family, you don't do it a lot, is valuable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Stanley. You've walked us through that entire process, helped us understand how to set themselves up for success, how that process might look. So to summarize, what are a few of the key pitfalls that you see regularly happening in this process that business owners could avoid?
I think going back to being prepared and not, running a tight ship. I mean, it's just like anything else. You sell your home, you want it to be clean, you want it to be uncluttered. You want it to be well manicured, curb appeal, etc. Businesses are no different, but you really should be considering 3 to 4 years ahead of time if you can, and not everybody has that luxury. Then the other thing is you may be sitting there running your business, minding your own business when somebody comes and makes you an offer. And that's not a bad thing also to get advice on. It's a very good idea to get a market study done, maybe even a fairness opinion, which is a legal document. Not a legal document, but it's a document that looks at your industry, businesses of your size, and what fair pricing is. Typically, businesses are valued on a multiple basis. In other words, a multiple of your net income, or really your EBITDA, which is net cash flow. So EBITDA stands for earnings before interest, taxes, and amortization, depreciation, amortization. So that's a measure of cash flow. That they say, typically concrete companies right now are selling for, small ones are selling for 6 to 7 times. Large ones are selling for 10 to 13 times. And the profitability impacts and the growth rate and all that. So when they say 7 times, they're talking about that EBITDA level. So if you're making $4 million in net cash flow to a buyer. 4 million times 7 is $28 million roughly. That's a target that you should be thinking about. Hopefully we'll have pluses just like you have minuses. You have pluses and minuses just like any other appraisal that say, oh, it's worth a little bit more because of this brand or this IP or these large contracts that they just got that are going to pay more in the future. So it's easy to, not easy, but it's necessary to give an evaluation of where a company should be priced based on its size and profit margins, et cetera. And that's something that I do for people all the time. It's very easy, relatively easy for me to do, to give them an idea of what the price range might be, which they always want to know. What do you think I'm worth? But the pitfalls are not understanding that, not understanding the valuation metrics and how they're arrived at, and really having somebody who has access to resources to tell you that. Okay, what should I expect? What do you think I'm worth? What are the pluses and cons of my business as you look at this process? But especially to be prepared with really good accounting and really good legal work. And not to put yourself in a situation where you have something unexpected come up, you get injured or sick or what have you, just wait till the last minute to do it, if you can avoid that. Although I know that's not possible always, but.
Well, Stanley, this has been a very informative conversation. It's helped me understand the value that an organization like yours provides when businesses are seeking or considering the opportunity for sale. Is there anything that we haven't discussed that you want to make sure our viewers know about the work that you do and how you can help benefit their business if they're considering selling?
I think that it's never a bad idea, just like you would with a doctor or an attorney or an accountant, to just like when you sell your business, sit down and have a high-level conversation. Here's the business I'm in. Tell me a little bit about yourself, meaning me. I want to know about you and your experience and your thoughts about my industry and my business, my region, in order for you to get comfortable. Because what we've just covered is a lot of information in a short period of time. But it'd be very smart of a business owner to sit down and say, high level, tell me about this process. How does it work? What goes wrong? How much does it cost? Those types of things. Because I'm sure there's a lot that I've left out here just because of the limited time. But yeah, just do some homework on who you would want to advise you. I don't advise, sell by owner. I realize that 3% of a large number is seemingly a lot of money, but honestly, it may be the number one thing that an advisor, an M&A advisor can give you is intelligence with regard to gathering information about your company and about the buyers. The biggest thing is who has the best information. If the buyers know what the prices are and the seller doesn't, the seller is going to get he's going to get taken, he or she is going to get taken, or they're not going to maximize their pricing. So if for no other reason, but also just to gather the information intelligently about your business and where it sits, what its worth is. I think I can easily say that a good M&A broker is one of the most worthwhile advisors or agents you could ever hire.
Well, it sounds like it, Stanley, and this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you for helping myself and our viewers understand a lot about the work that you do and how beneficial it is to businesses that are considering buying or selling. And so if you need to reach Stanley, we'll be providing that information, and I've really enjoyed sitting down with you today and learning more about your business.
Thanks, Christine. Appreciate it. You guys are great and look forward to working with you in the future.
Very good. Thanks so much. If you or your organization have a story to highlight, reach out to the Greater Naples Chamber. We'd love to continue the conversation. We'll see you next time on Chamber Chats.